Hi all, another fascinating game from Leela Chess, ID 507 against Stockfish 7. This is by David Grosvenor, so he uses Leela on a GTX 1060 and Stockfish 7 was on a 2.8 GHz 4 CPU setup. Time control 1 minute for 40 moves, very fast time control. Knight F3 from Leela, the Reti opening, and we transpose into an English opening. D4, early D4, C takes, knight takes, Stockfish 7 playing, black plays knight F6, knight C3, end of book here. E6, E4, Leela, bishop B4, now taking on C6, B takes, bishop D3. Now usually players with black hair, according to Chess-Based Live Book, they usually castle, not castle, that's what happened in the game, E5 is played. This does seem quite a safe lockdown on white potentially playing E5. And then, for example, both sides castling. This seems to be quite a safe position. However, in this particular game, Stockfish 7 castled here. This is much rarer. And in fact, in Livebook, most players don't play E5. You'd think that would be the punishment. In fact, this is actually played by Leela, E5, quite often castling here and just letting black transpose back into the main line is played. But Leela goes for it here with E5. Now maybe players think this is some sort of trap because it seems now black has a strong reply, Queen A5. So it hits E5, that E5 pawn, and threatens bishop takes C3. So isn't this a problem for black? If the knight retreated, of course it would be no problem at all. White has a small nice edge there, doesn't matter about the double pawns. But with this move, is this problematic? Well, Leela finds a really good move in this position. If E takes F6, the problem is bishop takes, check, hitting the rook, and if bishop D2, black can just take on D3 with a big advantage. So this might have dissuaded players to try for this E5, thinking it's some sort of trap. But in this position, there's one good move available, which Leela plays, which is just to support the pawn with bishop F4 and sacrifice a pawn over here, taking, black took on C3, queen takes C3, and king F1. So clearly options are limited here anyway. Bishop going back drops D3, queen going in front drops A1. So options are pretty limited. But how bad is this position? Or is it good for white? Intuitively, actually, with the options of H4 and Rook H3, this is actually quite promising. Leela's taken a bet on this, and it seems to me at least to be a very good bet to take. Rook C1, Queen A5, H4. With the bishop pair, space advantage, aggressive pawn in the centre, possibility of activating the rook, it seems white's prospects are pleasant. However, is this a cold shower move to the whole thing? F6 trying to open up the F file potentially against the white king. If we look at alternatives, because that is a bit radical, changing the pawn structure. If black played rook b8, then queen c2 is nice, hitting h7. It's not protected by anything except for the king. And if g6, then that's ready to open up the position. White should have a nice advantage in this kind of position. So it seems very logical to play f6. We have queen h5, provoking black to shut down here with f5. Clearly, if taking, this is just the classic mating pattern, of course. So f5 was played, shutting down white's attacking potential, it seems, for the moment. Rook h3, rook b8, queen g5, rook b2. Now maybe you might think h6, but the queen could install herself to g6 here, and this looks actually quite dangerous, even if white gives up a2 as well. This is a dangerous position brewing up, potentially because of this rook g3 and potential bishop takes h6. As an example, game sequence, this would be dangerous. Covering f6 and going for h6. This is just dangerous for black. This whole thing, this whole continuation, white ends up with a big edge, as an example. So rook b2 was played, not touching the h pawn. It might be tempting to kick that queen, but maybe futile. h5, now taking a2 anyway. h6, and isn't Leela just closing up her own attack here? Isn't this totally absurd? g6, what do you think the downside is of black's position here? Well, we'll see. I'll keep some tension in the story. King g1 is played. Rook f7. We have here a very interesting situation. If, as alternatives to rook f7, say rook b2, I'll give you an example. Continuation. The queen could go to e7. It's very difficult then to play rook f7 without dropping the e8 knight. So if black's doing nothing here, then white can play this c5, rook g3. See, c5 shuts down the possibility of queen b4 double attacking e7 and f4. Then white's playing for rook g6, and we reveal one major downside of this particular configuration, that actually the move rook takes g6 is devastating. So that's one tactical downside revealed in this variation of black's position. So even though it seems as though it's closed, the position is closed, it's actually rather dangerous. Let's go back here. So this is the point where rook f7 was played. So it is rather dangerous potentially with queen e7, rook g3, rook g6, h7. If we look at alternative in this line, again, move 23, just to show you why c5 is important, by the way. Rook g3, queen b4. And that's annoying because we can't play c5 now because the queen takes f4. So that would ruin things there. And also, let's have a look at this position on c5. I showed bishop b7. If queen b4 here, then white, even in this position, can just drop back the bishop with an advantage here. After rook g3, we're going to have the same sort of thing. Just drops back the bishop, and the same mechanism. So that's a very, very important mechanism to be aware of here. It looks as though it's closed, but it's got potential to open up because of rook g3, rook g6, basically. So rook f7, rook b1, and we reveal here, starting to reveal, there's another problem with black's position. This fawn pawn, thorn, one of my favourite attacking devices, has a downside. It closes up things, it doesn't open up lines. But the upside here of this fawn pawn restricting black's piece is actually the first rank is weaker here, and it's that first rank which is a total focus now of Leela's play, that 8th rank from Leela's perspective. So there's potential pin pieces, and the king, of course, to hunt down. King f8 is played, bishop f1. And you can see the idea of bishop f1, I hope. It clears that 3rd rank for a rook transfer. d5. Leela doesn't take en passant here. In fact, just goes immediately to try and get a rook to b8 now. So queen c7. And now c takes d5. Of course, it's devastating to take with the e pawn e6, hitting the queen and the rook. So we have c takes d5. And now actually, you might think rook b8, but actually bishop e3 is played. And this is a very strong threat to it. If queen takes e5 here, then check. And queen d8 is very, very powerful because the bishop's cutting down any protection of e8. So for example, like this is absolutely murderous for black. So we have here, after bishop e3, king g8, and now rook b8. This is starting to look nasty on the 1st rank. Rook c2, and logically doubling on that 8th rank from Leela's perspective, rook a8. Black is really tied down. It seems just like spectator pieces basically waiting for the pressure build up. Relentless pressure build up without any counterplay here. If you look at black's position, we have f4. Looks rather desperate already. Bishop takes, queen c5. Looking at f2. That's protected actually with queen h4. Queen f8. Bishop e3, rook fc7, and now it's here that actually the rooks double. We have bishop d7. Now e8 is the target, and Leela softens up the target e8, that pin piece, by playing bishop b5, removing a defender, taking time out of the battery to take out that defender. But now there's still this big threat of going back to double the rooks. We see here rook c8. Now rook bb8. So the pressure's really on c8 now. That's taken. We end up with this nasty pin piece. Rook c7 is played. Now here, attacking the pin piece, queen a4. Queen's very versatile here. So queen a4. We have king f7. Bishop g5. Black's pretty helpless here. It looks still the piece is pinned to the queen as well. So a5. Now white just improves the position. g3. Rook a7, just improving the position a little bit. And here, going in now, bishop d8. Rook a7. Bishop b6, trying to kick this rook off that second rank. And this is hopeless for black. Black played rook e7. If the rook leaves the second rank, for example, like this, then check is devastating. On king e7, there's things like bishop c5 check. And on king g8, again, here, actually, bishop c5 is really strong. For example, queen f7, queen a4, and there's no defending e8 in this position. Massive advantage for white. So if you look at this position, black's being overloaded, totally overloaded. So we have this rook e7, which loses, of course, the exchange, potentially. So if Leela wants it. d4, queen takes d4. g5 is desperate stuff. Now Leela takes the exchange. And a nice double attack now, queen e4, threatening rook b7. And queen takes h7. King f8, the game was adjudicated. There's a win here. If we look at this, rook b7, say knight c7, white can play a check, for example, and queen c6, just winning that knight. Or the queen if black plays this. So, yeah, we'll go to the final position. So in this game, the lack of the book move by Stockfish 7, not playing e5, Leela revealed the full horror of how to punish that, even though in Chess-Based Notebook, it seems a lot of players with white don't play e5. Maybe they're a bit wary of queen a5. But the way Leela played it seems to be very, very strong attacking compensation. Give up a pawn over here, install a form pawn with possibilities of rook g3, rook g6, and then attack on the 8th rank, because a lot of the black pieces are just so passive. So even though the form pawn closed up the attack apparently, as long as there's another road to use, that 8th rank, it didn't matter. So I thought that was another instructive positional attack, starting with a strong gambit. So I hope you got something from that. Comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated. Thanks very much.